Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, this one really,
It's really interesting.
it got me thinking. It's funny, we got the sermon to look at, and it's all about, stewardship and being good stewards of what God gives us.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but like my brain just kind of goes to like money,
Yeah,
right?
finances.
Finances, yeah.
Yeah.
But this sermon, it goes so much deeper and it's packed with these stories that just like really grabbed me.
Wow.
Sudden loss, this Korean War, refugees' regrets.
Mhm.
There's even a school report card bonfire.
Oh, wow.
I know, right?
Wild.
So,
I think we can all relate to this stuff, though, in some way. you know.
yeah.
Regardless of like what we believe, the core idea here is we're stewards, not owners of everything in our lives.
Okay, so not owners. That's interesting. I think we tend to feel pretty possessive of our stuff,
Oh, yeah.
or time or, everything.
Something.
So how does this sermon like differentiate between those two things?
Well, it starts with a story that's pretty jarring.
Okay.
It talks about this church member, Yu-Tai Gye, who died suddenly of a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
And it's a harsh reminder that we don't even truly own our own bodies,
Yeah.
let alone anything else.
Wow. That's heavy. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
even our own lives are something we're entrusted with, not something we have complete control over.
Exactly. And from there, the sermon kind of explodes outward,
Okay.
It's like, okay, if we're not really the ultimate owners of anything, how should we approach all these things we think we own?
Right.
Our time, our talents, our possessions,
Yeah.
even our relationships.
Okay. I'm starting to see where this is going. It's less about clinging to things and more about what being responsible caretakers.
Yeah.
Like that vacation home analogy you mentioned earlier.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah. Okay.
Imagine living in this amazing vacation home.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yours to enjoy, but you don't own it.
Mm-hmm.
So you take care of it, you use it wisely, but ultimately you're following the owner's rules.
And in this case, that owner would.
Well, that's where the religious perspective comes in.
Yeah.
But even if you take that out of the equation,
Yeah.
the underlying principle still holds true.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves.
That makes sense. So even if it's not a higher power,
Right.
it could be our community,
Exactly.
the environment, something we're responsible to.
Right. We're all connected in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and our actions have consequences that ripple outwards.
Yeah.
This sermon just uses the framework of God's ownership
Yeah.
to illustrate that responsibility.
Okay, so we're caretakers, not owners. We're a part of something bigger, but what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah.
How do we use what we've been given in a way that honors that responsibility?
Well, the sermon tells this really poignant story about a man who fled North Korea during the Korean War.
Okay.
And he left behind a lot,
Mm.
including some land that he owned.
Mm-hmm.
And years later, he regretted not donating that land to the church before he left.
He felt like he missed an opportunity to use what he had for something meaningful.
That's interesting because it wasn't about losing the land. It was about the missed potential.
Exactly.
It makes you think about what we might be holding back.
Absolutely. Maybe we're clinging to money
Yeah.
or time or even a certain skill that
Mhm.
we could be sharing or investing in something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
So what are we afraid of letting go of?
Right.
And what could that look like if we did?
This is starting to feel a lot less abstract and a lot more like, okay, what am I doing with my life kind of stuff?
Right.
But what about when things are taken from us?
Yeah.
Like we're being good stewards, but then boom, life throws a curveball.
Yeah. That's where the story of Job comes in,
Okay.
He's this biblical figure who loses everything, his wealth, his family, his health.
Oh, wow.
It's devastating, but his response is remarkable.
Okay.
He doesn't curse God or wallow in despair.
Mm-hmm.
He acknowledges that God gives and takes away, and we should be grateful regardless. So it's about accepting that even the things we think we own are ultimately temporary. It's a tough lesson, but I guess it's also kind of freeing.
Right. It shifts your perspective from why me to what now.
Mm-hmm.
It's about resilience,
Mm.
about finding meaning and purpose, even in the face of loss.
That's a powerful way to look at it. And it's not just a passive acceptance, right?
Right.
There's still an element of action, of doing something with what you have.
Exactly. That's where the parable of the talents comes in.
Okay. Yeah, remember that one?
Yeah. It's about these servants who are given different amounts of money to invest while their master's away.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who increase their money are rewarded,
Right.
while the one who buries his out of fear gets punished.
Okay, so it's not enough to just hold on to things we're supposed to be making them grow,
Yeah.
using them to create something more, but what does that look like practically? Like, I'm not exactly out here burying sacks of gold coins.
Right. Think about your own talents.
Okay.
What skills or resources are you underutilizing? Maybe it's a creative hobby, a knack for teaching, or even just a genuine desire to help others.
Yeah.
This parable reminds us that even small efforts, when invested wisely, can lead to significant growth.
That's a really interesting way to connect this ancient parable to modern life, but there's this idea in the parable that the servants were judged based on how much they increased their money.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that set a pretty high bar? Like, what if you're not the most talented person in the room?
That's a great point, and the sermon actually addresses that directly.
Okay.
It talks about how God doesn't use a relative evaluation system.
Okay.
It's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about using your unique gifts to the fullest.
So no keeping up with the Joneses.
Exactly.
That's a relief.
It's about focusing on your own potential, not on what others are doing.
Right.
The sermon emphasizes that we all have something valuable to offer, and it's about discovering what that is and then using it to make a positive impact.
All right. This is starting to click for me. Stewardship isn't just about money or possessions. It's about how we approach everything in our lives.
Yeah.
Our time, our relationships, our talents. It's about recognizing their value and using them intentionally.
You got it. And it's not about striving for some impossible standard of perfection. It's about progress.
Okay, so I'm feeling motivated, but also a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Where do we even start with all of this? Is there a stewardship for dummies guide out there somewhere?
Well, the sermon does share a final anecdote that I think brings it all back down to earth.
Okay.
It's about the student Kim Sangbok, who felt a sense of relief when his school's report cards accidentally burned in a fire.
Wait, seriously, relief? I would have freaked out.
I know, right?
Yeah.
He was a good student. But the idea of those grades defining him was just too much pressure. And that's the point the sermon is making. Those external markers of success.
Okay.
The grades, the awards, the money.
Yeah.
They're all temporary.
So it's like the ultimate burning report card. In the grand scheme of things, those achievements don't really define us.
Exactly what matters is the impact we make.
Yeah.
The relationships we build, the good we do in the world.
Okay, now that's a perspective shift I can get behind, but it also raises some big questions like, if earthly achievements aren't the goal, what does it mean to build a legacy that matters? How do we measure that impact, that good we're putting out into the world?
Those are some really profound questions, and I think they're at the heart of what this whole stewardship thing is all about. And luckily, this sermon has a lot more to say on the subject.
All right, then let's keep diving. This is just the beginning. That burning report card image really stuck with me. It's a powerful reminder that our worth isn't tied to those external measures of success.
It challenges us to redefine success, to think about what truly matters in the long run.
So if it's not about the grades or the accolades, what does it mean to build a legacy that endures? What does good stewardship look like in the context of our everyday lives?
Well, the sermon offers some pretty practical examples. One of the key themes that emerges is the importance of generosity.
Kind of generosity, that makes sense. But isn't that just about donating money to charity?
That's one way to express generosity, but it goes so much deeper than that.
Okay.
It's about a mindset, an attitude of giving and sharing.
Mm-hmm.
It can be about giving our time to volunteer for a cause we care about, lending a listening ear to a friend in need, or sharing our skills and knowledge to help others.
So it's not just about what we have,
Yeah.
but how we use it to benefit others.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we all have something valuable to offer, whether it's our time, our resources, our talents, or even just our presence and attention.
This is reminding me of something we talked about earlier, the idea that we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Our actions have ripple effects, so even small acts of generosity can make a difference.
That's a crucial point. It's easy to get caught up in thinking that we need to make some grand gesture to have an impact, but that's simply not true. Even the smallest acts of kindness or generosity can have a profound impact on someone's life.
This makes me wonder, what are some of the obstacles to generosity? What holds us back from giving more freely of ourselves?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest obstacles is fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of being taken advantage of, fear of making ourselves vulnerable.
I can definitely relate to that. It's easy to fall into that scarcity mindset, especially in a culture that constantly tells us we need more, more, more.
But the sermon challenges that scarcity mindset. It reminds us that true abundance comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give away.
So it's almost like a paradox. The more we give, the more we receive.
It's a beautiful paradox, and it's been proven time and time again. When we give generously, we open ourselves up to receiving blessings in unexpected ways.
Hmm.
It might not be material wealth, but it could be a sense of purpose, deeper relationships, or simply the joy that comes from making a difference in someone's life.
This is starting to make me rethink my whole approach to success. Maybe it's not about climbing the ladder or achieving some arbitrary level of wealth or status, but about using what I have to create positive change in the world.
I think that's a really powerful insight, and it ties back to the concept of stewardship. It's about recognizing that everything we have, our time, our talents, our resources, are gifts that we can use to make a difference.
So instead of asking, how can I get more, we should be asking, how can I give more?
Exactly. It's a shift in perspective, a change in focus. It's about moving from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance.
This reminds me of the parable of the talents. Again, the servants who were rewarded weren't just sitting on their talents, they were actively using them, investing them, taking risks to make them grow.
That's such a great connection. It highlights the importance of being active stewards, not passive ones. It's not enough to just hold on to what we have. We need to be using it, sharing it, making it work for the greater good.
But the parable also emphasizes that we're all given different talents, different amounts to work with. It's easy to fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others and feeling like we don't have enough to make a real difference.
That's a valid point, and I think it's important to remember that we're not being judged in comparison to others, but in relation to our own potential. What matters is that we're using what we have to the best of our ability, not that we're outperforming everyone else.
So it's less about keeping up with the Joneses and more about running our own race.
Exactly. It's about focusing on our own unique gifts and using them to contribute in our own unique way.
That's a really encouraging message. It means that we don't need to have $1 million or a fancy degree to be good stewards. We can start where we are with what we have and make a difference right now.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to that burning report card analogy. It's a reminder that true success isn't measured by external markers, but by the positive impact we have on the world around us.
Okay, but how do we actually measure that impact? It's not like there's a good deeds scoreboard somewhere.
You're right. There's no tangible scorecard. But I think we can sense it. We can feel it in our hearts when we're living in alignment with our values, when we're using our gifts to make a difference, when we're contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's more about an internal sense of fulfillment than external validation.
Exactly. It's about living a life that feels meaningful and purposeful, regardless of what the world might say about it.
This is starting to paint a really beautiful picture of what a life of stewardship can look like. It's not about striving for some unattainable ideal, but about making conscious choices, big and small, to use what we have for good.
I think you've captured it perfectly. And the beauty of it is that it's a journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and growing in our understanding of what it means to be good stewards.
And that journey can start right now.
Absolutely. It's never too late to start making more conscious, generous, and impactful choices.
This conversation has definitely sparked some new ideas for me. I'm feeling inspired to take a closer look at my own life and see where I can be a better steward of what I've been given.
That's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. And I'm sure our listeners are feeling inspired as well.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the practical aspects of generosity to the more profound questions of legacy and impact. But I think it's time to shift gears and bring it all together with a final thought-provoking challenge for our listeners. What do you think?
I love that idea. Let's leave them with something to chew on.
All right, so we've talked about generosity, responsibility, that burning report card metaphor, but I think it's time to get really practical, What's one specific thing, one action step that our listeners can take away from this whole idea of stewardship?
I love that challenge. It's easy to get lost in the big ideas, but ultimately it comes down to what we do with this knowledge.
Exactly. So what's the one thing that jumps out at you from this sermon that people can actually apply to their lives, starting today?
Well, for me, it's this idea of being intentional. It's not just about, randomly doing good deeds. It's about consciously choosing to use our resources, our talents, our time in a way that aligns with our values and purpose.
Okay, intentionality. I like that. So it's less about checking off boxes and more about making choices that reflect what we truly care about.
Right. It's about asking ourselves, how can I use what I have to make a positive impact? What gifts am I sitting on that could benefit someone else? Where can I make a difference, even in a small way?
So it's about identifying our unique strengths and then figuring out how to use them for good, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us.
Precisely. And that doesn't have to be some grand world-changing thing. Maybe it's volunteering at a local soup kitchen, mentoring a young person, or simply being more present and attentive in our relationships.
This reminds me of that quote, Be the change you wish to see in the world. Stewardship isn't just about managing what we have, it's about actively shaping the world we want to live in.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I think that's where the real power of stewardship lies. It empowers us to take ownership of our lives and make choices that create positive change, both for ourselves and for others.
So it's not about waiting for someone else to fix the world, it's about recognizing that we each have a role to play.
Absolutely, and that role doesn't require a specific title or position. It's simply about being mindful, intentional, and generous with what we've been given.
Okay, but I'm still wondering how we measure our impact. Like, how do we know if we're actually making a difference? Is there a way to track our stewardship progress, so to speak?
Well, the sermon doesn't offer any hard and fast metrics, but it does suggest that we can sense it, feel it, when we're living in alignment with our purpose, when we're using our gifts to serve others.
So it's less about external validation and more about that internal sense of fulfillment.
Exactly. It's about knowing that you're doing your part, however big or small, to make the world a better place.
That reminds me of that story we talked about earlier, the man who regretted not donating his land before fleeing North Korea. It wasn't about the financial value of the land. It was about the missed opportunity to use it for something meaningful.
That's a great point. It highlights the fact that sometimes the most impactful acts of stewardship aren't about grand gestures or huge sums of money, but about simply recognizing the potential in what we have and using it for good.
So maybe true stewardship isn't about the what, but the why. It's about the intention behind our actions, the motivation that drives us to make a difference.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's not about achieving some arbitrary level of goodness, but about living a life that reflects our values and contributes to something larger than ourselves.
It's like that burning report card metaphor all over again. It's not about the grades or the awards. It's about the impact we have on the world, the lives we touch, the legacy we leave behind.
And that legacy doesn't have to be grand or monumental. It can be woven into the fabric of our everyday lives in the kindness we offer, the generosity we express, the love we share.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into stewardship, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question. It's a question that goes beyond just understanding the concept of stewardship and challenges us to put it into action.
Ooh, sounds perfect. What's the question?
Here it is. What is one area of your life, just one, where you can be a better steward of what you've been given? It could be your time, your talents, your relationships, your resources. The possibilities are endless. Take a moment to really think about this and consider what small changes you can make to live a more intentional, generous, and impactful life.
That's a great question to leave our listeners with. Remember, stewardship is a journey, not a destination. It's about progress, not perfection. Start small, be consistent, and watch as those small acts of intentionality and generosity ripple outward, creating a positive impact that extends far beyond yourself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into stewardship. We hope this episode has sparked some new ideas and inspired you to approach your life with a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep making a difference.